Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
Welcome to this class, which I called Kohelet and Eicha because my goal is to create some readers in our community who feel confident and competent and able to jump in and participate and chant for us in some of the more specialized area of chanting from scrolls in our community. So I want to back up and talk about some of the basics of chanting, the most basics of chanting, and then we'll get into Shir HaShirim itself, into the Song of Songs, and we'll talk about Song of Songs and what it has in common with Kohelet. So there are lots of different pieces of our tradition that are chanted, and chant is different than the idea of nusach, and it's different than the idea of singing. Singing is just what it sounds like. It's song. Sometimes song is improvised and sometimes it's through composed and it's written down. Nusach, as I talk about it sometimes in our classes, is a combination of mode and motif. It's a mode that we're in, but it's also not entirely improvised. It's a series of motifs that get repeated over and over again. Sometimes, every once in a while, nusach even shows up in our chanting. That's going to come up later on in this class because Eicha actually has nusach that shows up in it. There's an entire chapter of Eicha that's basically chanted, but not really chanted, to nusach. It's sung to a nusach. Okay, so it's sung to a mode and a motif instead of being sung to specific symbol-based chant. Cantillation, though, is not a specifically Jewish concept, right? It's a concept that belongs to lots of different ancient traditions. And because this isn't a basic class on cantillation, and because we're not teaching a whole class from Jacobson or from some of the basic books, which I'm sure that Rick, who's here, could probably teach really beautifully as well, I'm not going to get into the very most basics of what chant are, but I do want to talk about the functionality of chant, because the functionality of chant is going to help us to understand what it's going to do for us as we're remastering a new system. So whether chant as a concept is a new idea for you and using it and doing it is a new thing for you, or whether it's just a new system that you're mastering, it's really important to remember what the functions of cantillation are, these marks that are on the page. So when you look at a page out of a Tanakh or a Chumash, different versions of the Hebrew Bible that have Hebrew on them, right? Rick has a Tanakh in front of him, and you might have any different version of a page in front of you. I'm going to put a page up in front of us of Shir HaShirim. You're going to see lots of different, what my professor, Dr. Rabbi Bert Vysotsky would call jots and tittles, right? Lots of different little marks that might be on the page. Lots and lots of different kinds. One of those types of marks that you might see on a page are the consonants on the page, the Hebrew letters that are consonants, right? There's a shin, a yud, a resh. Another type of mark that you're going to see on the page is you're going to see vowels on the page. You'll see a hirik, right? You'll see the letter, the vowel that tells you that this is pronounced e, so that you know this is sh, e, she, right? And then you'll see a patach that says this is an ah sound, right? Ha, ah. And so you see that there are vowels on the page as well. Those are other marks that you see on the page. So you see letters. That's one type of a mark that you see on the page. Another type of a mark that you'll see on the page is punctuation, right? So punctuation, that's on the page as well. This is one type of a punctuation that you see on the page. What does this symbolize here? These two vertical dots up and down that come parallel to the letters. What does that symbolize?
That's the sof pasuk. That's the it's like a period.
Right. It's the sof pasuk, which literally means the end of a verse. Interestingly, we're going to get back to that. That's one way of thinking about trope as well. Technically, it kind of serves as a trope mark in a lot of senses, because This is another type of punctuation. This punctuation is called a meteg, and it's an accent mark. Okay, so it's a miftah, it's an accent mark. So a meteg is a vertical line that falls underneath a vowel, and it's there as an accent mark. We're going to come back to accents in just a minute. But the idea is that most of the time when you're looking at punctuation on a page, the punctuation that you're going to see is just to mark the end of a verse. Okay? There's another way that you can tell what verse you're looking at when you look at a page of the Bible, right? The Hebrew Bible when you're looking in Hebrew. And how is that? Ed, how would you know what verse you're looking at this page like this?
How would I know what verse I'm looking at?
Yeah, I mean, which verse you're looking at, what would you look at probably? If I said we're starting at verse 2, what would you probably look at?
I can't point to it, but it starts with the Yud, right? The second one.
Right. You look for the number 2, right? You just basically look for the number. So you have chapters that are marked in one place, and then you have numbers that are marked elsewhere. In some tikkunim and in some Hebrew books, this might even be enumerated in a Hebrew letter rather than an Arabic numeral, right? So it just depends on what type of a book you're looking at. But yeah, it would be marked here as well. Interestingly, in some books, and I can change this we're looking at a Safaria page here, since we're recording this as a podcast, I want to make sure that I verbalize as much as I can to make this a good audio experience as well. Interestingly, if I take away these marks, you can see that if I take away the vocalization, as it says here, completely, they keep the marks here, but it does change this over to, that's interesting, it does change it over to the Hebrew marks as well, so you can see this. But you can imagine, I can't hold my hand over, you can imagine these being taken away entirely, and it takes away all these marks. If you were to look into a scroll itself, you would wind up not seeing any of the of these marks at all, any of these punctuation marks at all.
The hyphens too. There's a hyphen between ki and tovim. Yeah, that wouldn't be there.
Excellent. So this makaf, this hyphen, as we call it, which we call a makaf, this hyphen wouldn't be there as well. You're absolutely right. It's interesting that vocalization still shows up. So that's great. Now I'm going to take away this screen share, and we're going to talk about what's different about this class than another class that you might take. So if you were to take a basic chanting class in Torah or in Haftarah Trope, you would wind up talking about how the skill that we're trying to get down is that we first want to talk about trope and the function of trope and what trope is doing on for a word. And then we're going to learn how to sing, how to chant those trope marks. And then we're going to learn how to apply those to the words, right? And then we're going to sing and we're going to learn some chunk of them, right? And then we're going to learn how to apply those to the scroll so that when you get up to the scroll to read it, then you're going to be able to chant it having memorized all of those pieces of pointillation, as I would call it in English, all of the nikud, right? The pointillation, all those dots, those jots and tittles that go away, or rather were never there in the scroll. So they're all helper marks when you're looking in a book, but when you go up to the scroll, they all are not present. So that's when you're chanting Torah. That's when you're learning to chant Torah. But unlike learning Torah and like learning Haftarah, when you're learning to chant the specific trope for the books that we're going to be looking at in this class, you do not need to do that memorization because it's not the custom in our community or in most communities to chant these books from a scroll themselves, even though there are many communities that actually own these books, including we do as well, own these books as scribed in a scroll. We don't chant them from scrolls because we aren't required to chant them directly from scrolls. And since we're not required to, we don't, because it's easier to chant them with the marks in front of them, in front of us. And so we chant them directly from a book. So the only task that we have in front of us is to learn the system of chanting them, right? To learn the marks and what those marks sound like, and then to take those marks and to apply them to the specific chapters of the books that we have in front of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the books that we're going to look at in this class, specifically that I want to look at coming up ahead of us, are the ones that apply to the holidays that are coming up ahead on the calendar. 2 in a row happen to have the same trope system, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that and how that works. So 3 of the scrolls that fall into the scrolls that we read in the part of Tanakh, in the Ketuvim section, the Ketuvim, in the written section, fall out for the 3 festivals that we have over the course of the year. We have 3 festival holidays. What are they? Let's start let's go in order of actually what's coming up, because that's what we're going to talk through. So what's the next festival holiday coming up? I'll give you a hint. It's not Purim, right? Purim is not a Chag. It doesn't show up in the Torah itself. These 3 festival holidays show up in the Torah themselves. And on Purim, we actually do read from a scroll itself. So what's the next Chag festival is described in the Torah?
Matzah Day.
Matzah Day, Pesach, Chag Aviv, okay? So we have Pesach that comes up. And on Pesach, we have a scroll that the rabbis have paired nicely with us, right? I always think of it like a wine pairing. They've paired us a scroll. And do you know what scroll they've paired with that? They've paired Shir HaShirim, like a love story, okay? So Shir HaShirim is the book that's read either on Chol HaMoed, on the intermediate Shabbat of Pesach, or as the case actually is this year, on the 7th day, because it falls out on Shabbat and Shabbat, okay? Because you don't have an intermediate Shabbat. Erev Seder night, the first night of Seder, is Motzei Shabbat. It's a Saturday night. So we only have a 7th day of Shabbat, not a Chol HaMoed Shabbat. So that's when we read it. It's just a do the math kind of thing, okay? So we read it on that 7th day, which is a Shabbat. So that's when we chant Shir HaShirim.
I think that's April 3rd. I think it's April 3rd
Something
this
like
year.
Yeah. So that's when we're going to chant Shir HaShirim. What's the next Chag after that? Exactly 7 weeks from the second night of Seder, when we count forward from that. What's the next Chag to fall out? After we count the Omer, it's
Torah Day.
Yeah, Shavuot. Okay, so when we fall out with Shavuot. And Shavuot gets, because it's a receiving the Torah kind of day, gets paired with the book of Ruth. And Ruth and Shir HaShirim get assigned in the Ashkenazi chanting tradition, meaning the Eastern European chanting tradition, the same cantillation system. And so we get to chant them in the same way, which means that if you are dedicating yourself to learning how to chant these books, then you're learning how to chant them in the same, you're learning for the next 2 holidays coming up. If you learn a nice little chunk of it, then you can chant them. You can chant for both holidays if you learn to master them a little bit, right? And I find that very exciting, because then I can train some new readers for some of these books in our community. So I want us to begin by taking a look at Shir HaShirim Trope itself. I want us to look at a page of Trope. And I'm going to send this resource to you, and it's going to be in the show notes for the podcast as well, so that people can take a look at this. This is a page that was prepared by a colleague of mine, Cantor Chorny, and it is a fantastic resource. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and then I will send a PDF to everyone participating in the class of this page. This is a wonderful, completely musical sheet of the trope, and it's broken down by the trope system. This is the fine Rosowski trope system. Okay, so this is Cantor's Fine and Rosowski's system. It just has Rosowski's name, but it's Cantor's Fine and Rosowski together. And this is the Mercha Tipcha Sof Pasuk comes first as a system, and then Munach Etnach Ta comes second in the line. So they want you to learn the Sof Pasuk first, and then the Munach et Nachta second. So that's why over here on the right, and these are just stand-ins, letters, the first letter of each of the tropes stands in for it, and then the trope is on the word. There's a stand-in for the trope in the form of a letter, and then the trope symbol itself is underneath there. You see that? Over on the right. And here are the musical notes that get assigned to the names of the trope. So, we are going to do some humming, and I think that my suggestion to you is, in order for us to do this together, I'm going to suggest that everybody who's participating goes on mute so that we can do some singing and humming, and then we'll do some unmuting if you're feeling brave. So first, go on mute so that I can encourage you to do some singing, all right? And you can repeat after me. So I'm going to establish a key, which is not going to be the actual key on the page. So I hope nobody who is listening to this and also looking at the sheet has perfect pitch, because that'll drive you crazy. I won't name anybody by name. So let's see. Mercha tibecha, mercha sof pasuk. Mercha. So I'm going to have you just repeat mercha after me. Mercha. And you'll do mercha or mercha if you want to do it down the octave. Mercha. Mercha. Tibecha. 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 Tibecha, tibecha. Now I'm going to do mercha, tibecha. You should do mercha, tibecha. Now I'm going to do just mercha sof pasuk. Mercha sof pasuk. Mercha sof pasuk. Mercha is before sof pasuk is just one and the same note. Mercha, mercha, mercha sof pasuk. Mercha sof pasuk. Try it with me. Mercha sof pasuk. One more time, try it with me. Mercha sof pasuk. Let's go back to mercha tibcha. Try it with me. Mercha tibcha. Try it with me again. Mercha tibcha. Mercha tibcha. Let's do it one more time. Mercha tibcha together. Mercha tibcha. And then we're going to do mercha sof pasuk together. Mercha sof pasuk. Now let's do that whole phrase 3 times together. Mercha tibcha, mercha sof pasuk. Another time. Mercha tibcha, mercha sof pasuk. One more time. Mercha tibcha, mercha sof pasuk. Now let's look at munach. Now, even if you don't read music, you can find that note for the munach because we did mercha, and you can see that the cha is the same note as munach starts on. Munach, munach, munach. Et nachta, munach, et nachta, munach, et nachta. Go back to that tibcha. Can you bring your eyes back to that tibcha? Tibcha, munach, et nachta. Try that with me. Tibcha, munach, et nachta. Tibcha, munach, et nachta. One more time. Tibcha, munach, et nachta. Now this time, Tipcha Mercha Sof Pasuk. Tipcha Mercha Sof Pasuk. Keeping that Mercha Sof Pasuk different than the Munach et Nachta Mercha Sof Pasuk. That's the difference. Mercha is just that same note. Mercha Sof Pasuk Munach. That's how you know that you're only mid-sentence. T-D-D-D-D-D-T. D-D-D-D-D-T is ending the sentence. Okay, so this is going to become a part of the pattern. Let's leave this behind for a moment. Let's leave this sheet music behind for a moment. Actually, before we leave the sheet music behind for a moment, is there a brave somebody who wants to try to sing any part of this out loud?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Pick a phrase.
I'm looking at Shir HaShirim. I would do it like this, the first sentence.
Well, I want to stick to just the names of the trope so far. Okay. Before you go to Shir HaShirim, just the names of the trope so far.
Okay.
Mercha
Tipcha, I got that. But I would go Mercha Sof Pasuk, like Asher has a Mercha Sof Pasuk, or Siluk, if you want to use that word. But,
this system keeps the Mercha straight, yeah.
I know, but I like putting a little oomph there because there's a trope there. If it wasn't there, then it would just be Mercha Tipcha Sof Pasuk.
Correct.
But, there's always variations, and I'm just saying that's the way I kind of learned it. But I don't want to conflict with you.
Sure. So here's what I always say when it comes to this system. My trope personally is slightly different than this trope. My munach.
Good. Me too. Yeah.
My trope is slightly different, but here's what I'm going to say. I'll say two things to that. One is, for the purposes of this class, I'm going to remain true note for note to this sheet music, just for the consistency for the people who really need me to remain true note for note to the system. And two is, you don't have to, but what I do insist on, as best as you possibly can, is that you remain internally consistent. Because that's what the text asks for. Does that make sense? So that your et nachta remains consistent to Rick's et nachta. So that's what our system is asking for. So if that oomph means a lot to you, fantastic. But what you don't get to decide is that you sometimes give the oomph and you sometimes don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm just saying the difference would be Shir HaShirim Asher Li Shlomo is the way the music wants me to do it. But I like better Shir HaShirim Asher Li Shlomo. So Asher gets a trope and Li Shlomo gets a trope. But
so if you're going to do that, then I would just say that your Mercha before Sof Pasuk should always be Di Mercha Sof Pasuk. So then your Mercha before Sof Pasuk should always be that. So I'm just saying internal consistency to Rick Muller's system becomes that note. And that's beautiful. I think that, I just read this wonderful book by a man whose name I cannot pronounce very well. His name's Kurzat Ozenk, I think. He's a PhD and he runs a sub part of stick with me for a second. He runs a sub part of a lab at Stanford. It's their design lab. Okay. Yeah. And he runs a part of their lab called the Ritual Design Lab. He runs it with someone else. Her name's Margaret Hagen. That's her name, Margaret Hagen. And they've basically turned ritual into a science. And one of their principles of what makes for ritual, and I've been reading, they just had a new book come out, it's Rituals for Virtual Meetings. It's a wonderful book. And one of their principles about rituals is that part of what makes a ritual is that it evolves. So part of what makes a ritual is that it evolves. So I am with you, and that part of what makes a ritual is that it evolves. Now, part of what makes it authentic is that it's internally consistent. But part of what makes it interesting is that it can evolve. So, yes, I'm totally with you, and let's keep it consistent. So let's take a look. Let's do what Rick was doing, and let's go to the text itself. Does that sound good? Let's go to the Shir HaShirim, which does start with a mercha tibcha mercha sof pasuk phrase. And let's look for a few phrases that are like that. Just the mercha tibcha mercha sof pasuk phrase. So let's stop the share for a second, and we're going to look at just some phrases that are like that. Okay? I'll put this back up on the screen. And if you want to look at this on your own, I'm going to put a link in the chat. You can find Safari is a wonderful resource to take a look at a pointillated text. If you want to look at a pointillated text, right? A text that has all of the trope and all of the vowels in it online, and you don't have a book in front of you, you can always look at Shir HaShirim. But I'll share it in front of us. We can look together. There we go. So let's just read the text in the Hebrew first to make sure that we get it. Shir HaShirim Asher Lishlomo. And I want to point out that Trope has 3 jobs to do in this sentence. Right? It has 3 jobs to do in this sentence. It's going to tell us how to sing it, but we're about to get there. We're not there yet. It's telling us a little bit about the syntax of this sentence, how the sentence is broken up. It's a little bit about the commas and how the sentence itself is broken up. It's a very short sentence because it only has a short, well, we can see it's a short sentence, but it only has one short trope phrase in it. And the third thing is it tells us where the words are accented. It's not Shir HaShirim, it's Shir HaShirim. Because the trope shows up underneath the resh with the hirik. Shir HaShirim. Asher Lishlomo. Okay, that's where the words are accented, where the trope are. So those are the jobs of the trope in the sentence. So I want to remind you that mercha is a 2-note trope, right? Mercha, mercha tibcha. But our first mercha word is only a 1-syllable word. So what do we drop? We drop the...
You drop the second note, or you drop one of the notes. You
drop the first note. You drop the lower note. So because we treat the lower note, we treat the lower note like it's a diving board, like it's a springboard. That's probably a better word for it. Like it's a springboard to the upper note. So we think of it as mercha. And the reason that we know that, this is a bit meta, but if you think about it, the accent on the word mercha is there to tell us that. The main part of the trope mercha is the cha. Mercha. You hear that? So even in the trope mercha, we're being told that that's the main part of it. Mercha. So if we can only have one part of the trope, it's this note. Shir. Okay, so that's the note that we're keeping. That's how we know. Shir. And then tibcha. Hashi. And we have to, now we have too many notes. Tibcha. But we're not supposed to start moving on it until we get to the reem. And so we have to do something that we talked about in Nusach. Ed, you were in one of my Sior classes, and we talked about how sometimes we need to fit some more notes into something. So we use something called the reciting tone, which is where we take a note that we're going to use and we just stick to it for a few staccato notes so that we can use it. Shir, HaShirim. So we're just doing an extra little note there. Shir HaShirim. And then I'm going to stick to being true to the music here, which is that mercha is just one note repeated. Asher Lishlomo. So pasuk. Asher Lishlomo. Okay. Let's look to another mercha tibcha miyayin, right? Kitovim, and now we have a mercha that can be applied to multiple vowels. Does someone want to try kitovim dodecha miyayin? Mercha tibcha. So pasuk. Do you want to try ki tovim dodecha miyayin.
Me or Ed?
Either one of you. Mercha ki.
Ki tovim dodecha miyayin.
Good. And you skip the
Miyayin, if you want to do
go
it.
right to the so
Yeah.
Right. Mihayin. Mihayin. You can skip all the fancies and go right to Mihayin. Good. And then now we have a Tibcha. And then Munach.
Shemecha.
And you're adding that extra little bit in there. Let's look at the sheet music again. Hang on. I share that again.
I don't want to dominate things, Ed. Please sing when you want to, okay?
I think he's happy to let you.
I'm polishing up my other trope that are rare that I know the common ones, but the ones that don't come very often, I want to get those down better. So
I want to show you something, Rick, on this trope.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that you know that your trope is slightly different, and that's okay. Just be consistent with it. Munach, ehitnach, and then you're adding in ta. You're adding in a B here. Da da.
So I didn't have to. I would just.
Ehitnach ta.
Yeah. Turak shemecha or Turak shemecha. I can do it either way.
You're still adding in that t. This one just has munach ehitnach ta. It's this one's just ehitnach ta. Nope, this one's just ehitnach ta shemecha.
Shemecha, okay.
Shemecha.
Shemecha without the okay.
It's missing this note. Shemecha.
Shemen, Turak, Shemecha.
Isn't that weird? Turak,
well, it's not weird. Shemecha. It's just a little slide.
Turak, Shemecha.
I don't know.
Turak,
Either Shemecha. Either way works. I don't want to. Right. I don't want to gum things up, but yeah.
It's not about gumming it up. What it is about being aware of it. And being aware of whether you're doing it consistently or not. So it's just one system versus another. I also am used to doing that at Nachta with the extra 6.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Let's look at the. Let's look back at the.
Alkane, the rest of it. Alkane. Yeah. Alamot ahevucha is the way I could do it. Alemot ahevucha is the other way. Is the music sheet, I think. Ahevuch. I don't know. Okay. Alkane. Yeah.
Right. Alkane. Alamot. Alkane. Alamot ahavucha. Alamot ahavucha. So alamot is just one note.
According to Rusowski, yes. Okay, fine in Rusowski.
Exactly. And then Mashecheni acharech narutza.
Or narutza, if you don't want to do the extra note, but I like the way you do it the first time. I like the first time better. Narutza.
Narutza. Exactly. Good. And then
Mesharim. Yeah.
And then finish it with ahevucha.
Mesharim ahevucha. Or you could do aha. You could do extra stuff if you want to. Mesharim ahevucha, but there's no really emphasis on the aleph. It's just adding your flavor to it. So, but you could just literally do Mesharim ahevucha like that.
Good. Ahevucha or ahevucha. Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's great. It's part of it is going back and just getting reconsistent at doing all of these in the system. That's great. Okay, let's take a look before we finish the class day. Let's look ahead to the Kadma Mapach Pashta system, okay? Kadma. We're going to look at it together. 1 second. Let me pull it up.
Is the way I remember
Don't
it.
sing it just yet.
Okay, sorry.
We're getting there. So, Mercha Kadma. We're making sure that we're not going too high. Kadma Mapa Pashta Kadma. Making sure we're not going too high on the Kadma. Kadma Mapa Pashta Munach Katon. Okay, good. So just listening for a minute, right? And maybe go on mute so that you can repeat after me, because it's always helpful to do that. And also, so for the podcast, if people are repeating, then they can hear and they can repeat after me too. Kadma mapa pashta munach katon. Kadma. So just try that. Kadma. Kadma mapa. Kadma mapa. Now I'm going to go on. Kadma mapa pashta munach 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 katon munach katon munach katon. So it's that natural B that really makes the flavor there at the munach katon. And then back to Tibecha, Mercha Sof Pasuk. Kadma Mapach Pashta Unach Unach Katon. Okay. Kadma Mapach Pashta Unach. Anybody want to try?
I was just going to say the first one is on verse 13, if you wanted to.
I want to hear it from the sheet music, just the Kadma. Okay. Or not from the sheet music necessarily, but with the trope names. Kadma mapach.
Munach katon.
Kadma katon.
Kadma mapach pashta munach katon.
Don't go up on katon yet, though. Munach
katon.
There you go. That's it. Okay. That's it. Nailed it. Good. And so I think start to explore the kadmas and mapachs in there to be able to begin to apply those. The beginning of Shir HaShirim is mostly these two phrases. It's mostly Mercha Tibcha, Sof Pasuk, Et Nachta, Kadma Mapach, and Munach Katon. Almost entirely. A little Pashta in there.
Yeah, 13 and 14 you have good examples.
Yep.
And
so
15.
It's mostly that on the first page or two of the book. So that's where I leave you for class number 1.
Okay.
It's a start at the trope. Yeah, time flies really, really quickly with this class. I hope it was a good introduction to doing this book. The whole point here is to create for yourself an internally consistent system. If you get really good at becoming like a black belt in one system, it really is a remarkable thing to then be able to go in between in different systems and be able to travel in and out of different systems yourself, to be able to correct other people, to realize when you're going in and out of stuff as well. This is really wonderful because these books are short and there really are only 3 that this system applies to. So once you claim this, you can say, you know what, I always do chapter 2 of Shir HaShirim, I always do chapter 4 of Kohelet, whatever those things are, you can claim them. By the way, Kohelet is, as you could probably guess, we do it at Sukkot, right? It's the third one. So hopefully we're getting there by the end of this class together. Yeah, in the summer, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to learning this with all of you. And thanks for joining me. I look forward to our next lunch and learn together. Next Tuesday again. Yeah.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.